3 bombs, 1 tweet, and now Pam Bondi wants blood. No indictment, no evidence. Just a congresswoman who said, "I don't like Elon Musk," and a former attorney general who went on national TV to call it a threat to public safety. 3 explosive devices were found in Austin. No link to Jasmine Crockett. But that didn't stop Bondi. She named her, blamed her, and declared war on a black woman in Congress on her birthday. This isn't about Tesla. It's about silencing dissent. But Crockett didn't flinch. She showed up live on air to answer every accusation word for word. And what happened next wasn't just a debate. It was a reckoning. The sky outside the TYT East Coast studio looked like a warning. Thick clouds coiled over D.C. like secrets waiting to be weaponized. And from TYT's East Coast studio, where polite politics goes to die, Cenk Uygur is live, and this morning, he's got Jasmine Crockett and Pam Bondi in the same room. This isn't just a talk show. It's a political collision course. On the screen, a red ticker burned quietly beneath the anchor's desk. Did Representative Jasmine Crockett go too far? Inside the room was charged, not with noise, but with anticipation. The host, Uygur, cleared his throat earlier this week. Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett encouraged Americans to protest peacefully outside Tesla dealerships. But now the right is accusing her of inciting violence. And this morning, former Florida Attorney General Pam Bondi said she's going after Crockett personally. Is that justice or is it political theater? The camera pans slowly to Bondi. Blonde hair, perfect figure. Face like it was carved by a knife. A smile colder than the studio lights. Words matter. And when a sitting member of Congress openly cheers on protests, especially when we've already had violence at a Tesla dealership, someone has to be held accountable. Jasmine Crockett may want attention, but this time she's going to get consequences. Across from her, Jasmine Crockett sat completely still. No visible reaction. Just the kind of silence that made you wonder what was coming next. And then she spoke measured but loaded. I don't like Elon Musk. I've said that 50,000 times, and I'll say it again. I don't like that he fires workers on a whim. I don't like that he gets handed federal contracts like candy, while the rest of us fight for scraps. I don't like that he's got law enforcement, acting like his personal security detail. You want to know what I think? I think this country has one set of rules for the rich, and another set for those who dare to criticize them. The camera didn't cut away. It leaned in, drawn to the accumulation of logic and fury wrapped in poise. Let me be crystal clear, Elon Musk is not a capitalist success story. He's a government-sponsored monopoly, and somehow he's convinced half of America that being rich means being untouchable. Pam Bondi sat still, but the tension in her expression betrayed a reaction. Crockett kept going, her momentum now undeniable. The rest of us, we can't snap our fingers and get federal agencies to patrol our private properties. We can't phone a friend at DOJ and get immunity with our morning coffee. Our communities get criminalized. He gets codified, the host Uygur. Shifted his papers but didn't interrupt. This wasn't a debate anymore. It was a deposition, so yes, on my birthday I saw people protesting peacefully, globally against the unchecked power of a man who's grown comfortable using federal systems. Like they're extensions of his brand. Bondi broke her stillness with a familiar line. You're going after a man who's building the future. Creating jobs, innovating? Crockett looked at her the way a lawyer looks at a weak witness. With room to dismantle jobs funded by government subsidies. Innovations, subsidized by the very taxpayers you're now scolding for protesting. Let's stop pretending this is meritocracy. It's corporate feudalism with better marketing. The host Uygur finally cut in, not to steer the segment, but to catch up just for clarity. Congresswoman Crockett, your statement did include explicit calls for peaceful protest. Crockett didn't pause. She'd anticipated the interjection like a chess player 5 moves deep. Of course, I told them to speak peacefully. Consult a lawyer, understand the Constitution you all claim to revere. I've said it again and again, not because I'm afraid, but because I believe in civic responsibility. Then she turned toward Bondi, not with contempt, but with calibrated clarity. You don't get to twist my words and call it violence. That's projection, that's power. Trying to punish truth, you know what is dangerous. A billionaire threatening a sitting member of Congress, while the DOJ stays silent, nodding like backup dancers. She let the silence hold for just long enough to feel like a verdict. If the DOJ wants to make retribution their mission statement, I'm not stepping back. I'll meet them in the courtroom, on the House floor, in the streets if I have to. Then, like punctuation sharpened into steel, Mike dropped the screen behind, plays a clip. Crisp and clinical Pam Bondi on a local affiliate the night before stared down the barrel of the camera like it owed her testimony. If you go near a Tesla, we're coming after you. Even if you're just looking at one, don't touch it, you can look. But you cannot touch it, because if you touch it, Pam Bondi is coming after you. Cenk turned to Bondi with a sarcastic voice. You heard it. Department of Justice rebranded as Department of Don't Touch Elon. That pretty much sums it up. Bondi didn't flinch, her voice landed like a sopana. Someone threw a Molotov cocktail into a Tesla dealership. That's not activism, that's a federal crime. A business was torched. So let me ask who's responsible. She shifted in her seat, letting the question hang like an accusation without a period. We have someone in jail right now. They're looking at up to 20 years in prison. And we're not stopping there. If you're funding this, we're coming for you. We'll find out who you are. Do you protest Elon Musk? Do you incite chaos? Your next Crockett didn't blink. Her answer wasn't loud, but it stung like alcohol on a fresh wound. The one who threw the Molotov. Charge them, prosecute them. No one's defending arson. That's not where the problem is. Her gaze locked like crosshairs. The problem is you treating protests like terrorism, when the only terror here is a billionaire's ego, getting bruised by the Constitution. Bondi lifted her chin, lips tightening. You used your platform to rile people up. You call him a crook on national television. And the next thing that happens is a Tesla dealership on fire. Crockett smirked, but it wasn't joy. It was disbelief dressed in restraint. So I say he's a crook, and a Molotov magically appears. Cute timeline by that logic. Every Fox News segment should come with riot insurance. Cenk almost stepped in, but Crockett didn't need help. Here's the truth, Pam. You're not protecting Tesla. You're protecting power, and you're doing it by threatening anyone who dares speak against it. You're chasing donors, not bomb throwers? Because what really scares you isn't fire. It's people waking up. Bondi pointed vinegary. You used your platform to make it personal. You told people to target Tesla. Crockett's rebuttal was surgical. I told people to consult lawyers. I told them to know their rights. I told them to protest peacefully. I told them what this country used to call civic engagement. Before billionaires bought the dictionary, silence hung in the studio like a question no one wanted answered. Then Crockett finished, voice steady. Spine straight, you want to prosecute arsonists? Fine. But don't weaponize that to muzzle political speech. You don't want justice, you want obedience. And the final twist sharp. Short like a stock drop, you're not law and order. You're loyal in ownership. And if Elon Musk is the new standard for what deserves federal protection, then the Constitution stock just crashed. The clip from Bondi's appearance on a Texas affiliate played again, looping like a warning label stitched into the legal system. And if you're funding the protests, Pam Bondi is coming after you. As the studio lights dimmed back to live, the tension didn't reset, it hardened. Bondi turned back toward the panel, voice sharpened like a gavel mid-swing. No one here is encouraging Molotov cocktails. Obviously, that's violence. That's criminal. The person who did that should be arrested and face full prosecution. She paused not for effect, but to reload. But let's not pretend words don't lead to actions. Right after Congresswoman Crockett made her comments about Elon Musk, this morning 3 explosive devices were found in Austin, Texas, her own state. This isn't a coincidence, it's a consequence. The statement landed like a loaded accusation, flung under the veil of concern. Crockett must apologize not just to Texans, but to the shareholders of Tesla. To the American people, what she's doing isn't just reckless. It's dangerous, and then you saw what she said about Senator Cruz. I wouldn't be surprised if Congress moves to censure her. Honestly, it should. She sat back, confident the pile of implications would speak for themselves. But they didn't. Crockett leaned into her space, not with volume, but with precision. So that's where we are now. A few wires and rumors in Austin. And suddenly, I'm the one holding the match. Your party has spent years defending the ugliest public rhetoric imaginable. You called it passion when Trump told a mob to storm the Capitol. You called it hyperbole when they shouted, "Hang Mike Pence." And he said he deserves it. Bondi raised her hand not to interrupt, but to reassert control. This isn't about Trump. This is about your rhetoric and what it leads to. Crockett immediately replied, "Oh, it's always not about Trump, until someone's being investigated or arrested or beaten at a protest. Then suddenly you'll find your moral outrage." She stood not theatrically, but to level the room, let's get this clear. I told people to protest peacefully. I told them to consult lawyers. That's not a dog whistle, that's called civic engagement. Meanwhile, Donald Trump incites an insurrection. watches it unfold from a secure room, then spends the next year giving out pardons like party favors. And you dare tell me my words are dangerous? Bondi didn't respond immediately. The silence wasn't defensive. It was expectant, but Crockett filled it anyway, with the type of line that cleaves headlines open. You don't want justice, you want a gag order. You want protest without volume, anger without teeth, dissent that stays in its place. She looked around, not to seek validation, but to claim presence. And let me tell you something about presence. I represent the people who get told to calm down when they're right. The people who get arrested before they get heard. The people who aren't billionaires, but still believe in this country enough to show up for it. You say I incited violence. I say your silence toward Trump's mob is complicity. And your fixation on my words is nothing but selective outrage, disguised as patriotism. Bondi tried to lean back into the moment. You're making this partisan. Crockett turned toward her, not with fire, but something colder. No, I'm making it real. Then slowly as a warning if my words were dangerous. It's only because the system fears clarity more than chaos. And if Tesla stock dipped today, it wasn't because of me, it's because people are finally asking, why does one man get armored protection, while the people he fires get tear gas? Sank exhaled slowly into his mic. You said earlier, Pam, that words have consequences. He turned to Crockett and slightly nodded. Tonight yours landed harder. Jasmine Crockett took a breath. I wonder why Pam Bondi is so obsessed with what I'm saying and not, say, with the Secretary of Defense. Sharing bombing plans in a group chat app. The shift wasn't subtle. It was a sledgehammer through the noise. We're out here debating tweets and Tesla, while Signalgate is spiraling beneath everyone's feet. Tank lifted a brow. Even he hadn't expected her to go there so directly. Crockett continued, voice sharp as a report to oversight. Let's break it down, Signalgate. National Security Advisor Mike Walsh, chatting on an unencrypted app about bombing the Hotties. Pete Hegsworth chiming in with strike details, like it's fantasy football. And they accidentally drop into, get this, Jeffrey Goldberg, a journalist from the left side of the audience. Someone muttered loud enough to register. So now journalists get bomb coordinates by accident. Great, next week they'll send launch codes to the New York Times. That's not a policy disagreement. That's a breach. That's the kind of thing that under a sane administration would end in resignations, censures, maybe even criminal referrals. Bondi adjusted her earpiece. Still no interjection, but instead, here we are parsing my language about a billionaire. While the national security team's texting missile coordinates. Over brunch, the irony landed like an airstrike. Crockett asked, voice now with rhythm and direction. You know what I find funny? Signal doesn't preload onto your phone. You have to download it, create encrypted chats. Meaning what happened here wasn't just lazy, it was deliberate. She turned directly toward the audience camera. I treat my own Signal chats more carefully than the people running our defense apparatus. That should scare every American watching. Pam Bondi cleared her throat finally. You're taking isolated reports and turning them into scandal. There's no confirmed wrongdoing yet. Crockett fired back immediately. No confirmed wrongdoing. You have a journalist accidentally added to a Signal group discussing classified bombing operations. What do you need for a live stream? Let me ask again, is it reckless or is it systemic? Is it a fluke or is it... What happens when people in power stop thinking the rules apply to them? Bondi narrowed her eyes, arms crossing. Let's not pretend you're being objective here. This is clearly a partisan spin. Crockett looked straight ahead. Partisan spin, then explain to me why the same people demanding I apologize for protest rhetoric are radio silent when government officials mishandle military strategy. In open chats, you want to talk about national security. Let's talk about it because Signalgate isn't about an app. It's about arrogance. It's about people thinking they can operate above protocol. Because accountability is only for people without a lobbyists. Chung finally stepped in not to mediate, but to amplify. Just to be clear for our viewers, Signalgate refers to the use of a private, encrypted messaging app by high-level national security officials to discuss classified military operations, including bombing plans. That's not a conspiracy theory. That's confirmed reporting. Crockett nodded, and it's being ignored. Why? Because of this administration. This structure only sees danger when it's politically inconvenient. If Signalgate happened under a Democrat, we'd be halfway through impeachment hearings. The punchline hits like a steel hammer. But since it's under their guy, their people were stuck, debating whether my tone about Elon Musk hurt Tesla's stock. Bondi tried once more. You don't know the full context of those messages. Crockett countered without blinking. And you didn't ask for it because you weren't interested. Because you were too busy turning me into the villain of the week. While the real villains sit in secure rooms, forwarding war plans to influences. That's what this is about. Not tweets, not tone. Not Tesla, but distraction from this. From Signalgate, from a government that's forgotten which direction accountability is supposed to point. Crockett wasn't done. The moment Bondi tried to pivot away from Signalgate, Crockett drove the conversation even deeper into the rot. Let's talk about why this administration is so allergic to accountability. It's not because they believe everything's fine. It's because firing someone would mean admitting they made a bad decision in the first place. Schenk turned to the audience, eyebrow cocked as if inviting them to brace for what was coming next. Crockett delivered names like indictments. Pete Hegsworth, a Fox contributor. Not a general, not a strategist. Not a wartime anything, but he's now Secretary of Defense. The crowd let out a low collective, what part disbelief, part fury. Kash Patel, FBI Director. That's the guy who thinks Wikipedia counts as classified intel. Tulsi Gabbard, National Intelligence. Because apparently, all you need to run America's spy agencies is a podcast and a YouTube channel. And Robert F. Kennedy Jr. in charge of Health and Human Services, a man who spent more time undermining vaccines than building any public health infrastructure. Camera zoomed slowly on Crockett. She didn't raise her voice, but every syllable felt like a legal strike. These appointments aren't about skill. They're about loyalty. This is not a cabinet. It's a political protection racket dressed up in government titles. Bondi opened her mouth slightly but said nothing. Cheng stepped in with just enough timing to slice in reinforcement. And none of them were chosen because they were the best. They were chosen because they'll never say no to him. You want to talk about DEI? You're mad about qualified black and brown professionals entering government. Meanwhile, you've built an administration where the only qualifications are being on cable news and pledging eternal loyalty to a man who can't spell classified. Bondi clenched her pen, visibly cornered, but didn't interrupt. So yes, Pam, I know it's easier to come after me. I know it makes for better headlines. To frame a congresswoman as a threat than to answer real questions about national security and personnel failures. She paused. Not for drama, but for impact. But let's be real, what you're doing isn't law and order. It's narrative management. It's PR, and it's insulting to every American who still thinks public service should mean public competence. No one moved to counter her because at that moment, nothing could. Crockett wasn't winding down. She was loading the final round. Let's not forget, this is the same party that shrugged. When a man broke into Nancy Pelosi's home and beat her husband with a hammer, her voice didn't rise, it steadied. You want to talk about violence? That's violence. She paces the words, now deliberate, surgical. Let's not forget. This is the same group of people who justified attacking the U.S. Capitol, who tried to overthrow democracy on January 6th. The audience had gone from murmurs to full attention. They were okay with that hanging Mike Pence, okay? Hunting Nancy Pelosi, fine. Beating cops with flagpoles and fire extinguishers, acceptable. She turned slightly toward Bondi, not as an attack, but as exposure. And when they were caught, when videos surfaced, they said, oh, those were just tourists with zip ties. Tourists with body armor, tourists who smashed windows, stormed offices, smeared walls with hate. Crockett added, and here's the kicker. Donald Trump pardoned them. A sharp collective inhale in the studio. Then silence is heavy condemning not just the low-level ones, not just the confused. He pardoned the organizers. The ringleaders, she listed them as if reading a national indictment. Stuart Rhodes, Enrique Tarrio, Proud Boys oath keepers, domestic terrorists given presidential absolution. Pam Bondi shifted uncomfortably. Her voice finally broke in. We don't represent those people, but it was too late. Crockett cut clean. You don't get to separate now. You didn't distance yourself then. You didn't call them terrorists when they stormed the seat of government. You didn't demand accountability. When officers were bleeding on Capitol steps, she stepped forward not to loom, but to level instead. You call me dangerous because I told people to protest peacefully. You accuse me of inciting violence, while your leader turned insurrection into a campaign fundraiser. What scares you more, Pam? My tone or the mirror I'm holding up to your party silence? The audience began clapping. Not loud, not rowdy, just steady nod approval recognition. I don't need to raise my voice to expose hypocrisy. I don't need to twist facts, because they're twisted already by a system that punishes dissent and pardons destruction. Bondi opened her mouth again. The words didn't come. Crockett gave her no rescue line. You asked who incites violence. I ask who gave it a podium, who gave it immunity, who gave it cover. Until the flags turn into fists and the chants into blood on marble. Don't talk to me about violence until you clean your house first. Crockett looked directly into the camera. Now, do you understand? Pam Bondi clutches her pearls and acts horrified that I told people to protest Elon Musk peacefully. And yet this is the same party that under Donald Trump wanted the National Guard to open fire on peaceful George Floyd protesters. This is all documented. This isn't a theory. It's not commentary. It's true. Her voice now moved faster. Clipped, tactical, relentless, and these are the same people who now say, you can't even protest at a Tesla dealership. Like that's the real threat. Let me be crystal clear again. Violence is unacceptable. Anyone who engages in violent protest should be held accountable. But that's not what this is. This is a distraction, a deflection from Signalgate, from these catastrophic tariffs, from the collapse of ethics and logic inside this administration. They don't care about peace. They care about control. Shank watched her. Not moderating, but listening. It's always the same playbook. Blame the woke attack, DE. I demonize the LGBTQ community. Deport immigrants, create enemies. Then profit from them. She stepped once to the left, just enough to show movement without leaving the center. They're deporting people who've committed no crimes, arresting journalists who wrote op-eds, criticizing Israel's war in Gaza. That's the reality. Meanwhile, Elon Musk, he's being protected like a head of state. She scoffed, but not with laughter. With truth, you saw him on TV whining. I don't understand why people are angry with Tesla. Maybe it's because you're cutting jobs like you're pruning weeds. No process, no strategy. Just across the board, slash and burn. And when people ask why you say there's going to be some pain, her voice hardened. You know who's not feeling that pain, billionaires? They're not worried about rent or food or losing health care. They're fine. They're protected. She narrowed her stance because America, let's be honest, has become an oligarchy. Donald Trump is taking care of his friends, not the people, not the voters, but the donors, the insiders, the ones who give to his campaign and get to eat off the federal trough. He's not building a government. He's building a club, and if you don't kiss the ring, you don't get in. Big law firms are kneeling for him. Tech entrepreneurs lined up at the inauguration, not behind him but beside him, while family stood in the back. His millionaires got front row seats. And what do they want to privatize the nation? To turn citizenship into a subscription. Bondi remained silent. Her face froze. Even the studio lights seemed heavier. Do you know who profits from all these deportations? Crockett didn't wait for the answer. Private contractors, the ones who run the detention centers, the ones who write checks to Trump. That's who wins. Check finally spoke just one line, and we call that the free market. Crockett turned to him just enough to nod. Free for them, not for the rest of us. When the lights in the studio dimmed, Jasmine Crockett simply removed her mic, placed it gently on the table, and walked out without looking back. Pam Bondi, meanwhile, sat frozen in her chair a moment too long, her face unreadable under studio glare. No staff rushed over, just the sound of rustling papers and quiet camera crew whispers, as though everyone had witnessed something. They weren't quite sure how to classify, but couldn't deny had happened. Within an hour, the first clip went viral. Just Crockett eyes forward saying, "Don't talk to me about violence until you clean your house first." That line alone had over 4 million views before midnight. By morning, Twitter was flooded. Hashtag Signalgate trended globally. Memes painted BMW as a relic. Caption logged out Pearl clutching while Rome burns. Or simply Pam.Z has stopped responding. Even mainstream outlets couldn't ignore it. MSNBC called it the political cross-examination of the year. The Atlantic ran the headline, "When the prosecutor becomes the defendant." Fox News tried to spin Crockett's radical rhetoric, but the comment section drowned it in fire emojis and she cooked. Newsmax postponed her weekly legal segment without explanation. A scheduled keynote at the Legal Integrity Forum was quietly reassigned. Even her law firm's co-sponsors issued a joint statement, calling for a reevaluation of institutional associations. And Bondi, she disappeared. No tweets, no statements, no Fox phone. Her name vanished from panels she was booked for. Her silence said what her rhetoric couldn't. She'd lost the room in the war in Washington. Clarity is rare, it doesn't trend. But for 48 hours it did. Crockett didn't capitalize. No interviews, no retweets, no celebratory tour. She returned to the Hill, filed a F0I, a request on Signalgate, and walked into a closed-door hearing like nothing had happened. That more than any meme is what cemented the shift. A politician who didn't gloat, because the truth didn't need a victory lap. Meanwhile, the machine sputtered. White House spokespeople danced around Musk-related questions. House Republicans canceled a scheduled oversight hearing on media bias. A leaked internal DOJ memo admitted possible procedural lapses. In Signal communications and behind it all, Americans started asking new questions, not just about who's in power, but who's profiting from the deportations, from the pardons, from the silence. Because at the end of the day, this wasn't about a talk show. It was about what happens when power feels threatened. Not by volume, but by focus. They came to crucify a congresswoman, but left with a country watching their own funeral.